How's it going, guys? Salvi from Where So 1000. Today is September 17th, 2020, and today we're going to take a look at multiple tropical disturbances which are currently in the Atlantic. We obviously have Major Hurricane Teddy, which is currently spiraling towards the north and west and could become a threat to Bermuda and potentially Canada and maybe even New England within the next couple of days. And we'll also be talking about Invest 90L, which is currently a tropical disturbance that's in the Gulf of Mexico at this point and will likely develop into a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the very near future. And we also have another tropical disturbance that has a chance of developing and moving up towards the northwest. And we do have another tropical depression, but it won't be a threat to land, so it isn't anything to worry about. So let's begin with Hurricane Teddy, which is spiraling in the middle of the Atlantic, and you could see it looks very well organized. It pretty much nearly looks like the type of hurricanes you would see in a textbook, as it pretty much looks picture perfect, this hurricane. And this hurricane pretty much looks like the first thing you'll think of when you think of a hurricane. It has a lot of convection spiraling around the eye. There's a large swath of cloud cover surrounding the eye, and we're starting to get a more definitive eye at this point. And just so you know the stats of this storm, it's currently a 145 mile per hour storm with its millibar pressure down to 945 millibars, and it's moving around to the northwest at around 13 miles per hour, which is about average for a typical tropical cyclone. So you may be thinking, what is the cap that this will strengthen to? And it could potentially strengthen into maybe a Category 5 hurricane. I will not rule that out, because if we take a look at the whole Atlantic view right now, there isn't a lot that's going to slow this thing down. We do have an upper level low that's currently just south of Bermuda, and that might affect it on its trek on northward, where it may experience a little bit of upper level winds that may slow this thing down. However, for the most part, I don't think that it'll be enough to where it'll weaken this hurricane in a major way, as I expect it to maintain its major hurricane status until maybe it passes Bermuda, where the temperatures begin to get cooler and it'll experience a little bit more wind shear by an upper level trough that's going to come from the northeast later during the week. So it's currently so there isn't a ton of wind shear that's going to slow down, and in fact maybe these upper level winds might enhance the storm's intensity, since this upper level low is expected to move a little bit further south and then bring a southerly wind with this storm. And since this storm is moving to the north, it's the south wind that from this upper level low might enhance the winds on the eastern side of this storm, where the winds are blowing from the south to the north, and it's pretty much and the upper level winds will coincide with the direction of this storm. So I don't expect this upper level low to affect it at all, and even then it's a very weak upper level low, so I don't expect it to slow it down. And in terms of dry air, there is a little bit of dry air ahead of it. However, again, it isn't a lot, and with big storms like this, with strong storms like this, dry air that's this little won't really affect the strength much, as I expect continued strengthening till it reaches around Bermuda. And if we take a look at the sea surface temperatures, you see that for the most part it's above 80 degrees, above 25 degrees Celsius is around 80 degrees. So for the most part it's going to be above 80 degree water, to where it'll strengthen as it continues on northward. So in terms of strengthening, I expect this to be maybe could strengthen into a Category 5. I won't rule that out. But even if it strengthens a Category 5 or Category 4 storm, I want people in Bermuda who may be impacted by this storm to definitely don't let your guard down if this lowers a category, maybe even Category 3, because that's still major hurricane status and could cause a lot of damage in Bermuda. I just wanted to remind those in Bermuda because I don't want anyone to potentially let their guard down for such a big storm like this in Bermuda. So here's a National Hurricane Center track of this storm where it takes it up to the northwest, and then as of right now, National Hurricane Center is putting at least the center of this storm just to the east of Bermuda, which definitely would be good news, especially that Bermuda may be getting the western side of this storm, which is typically the portion of hurricanes that's weaker and has a smaller wind field, so impacts won't be as large. However, I do want to emphasize that this hurricane could definitely move outside the line in this cone, and it could definitely impact Bermuda and make landfall in Bermuda, as just a couple miles of a shift more towards the west may change impacts drastically for Bermuda. However, any minuscule changes to maybe moving towards the east, that might completely make Bermuda miss out from all the major impacts from this storm. So definitely keep a close eye on this, Bermuda, because it's going to be a close call to where this storm will exactly be located. However, prepare as if a hurricane is coming, because it's better to be safe than sorry. So you might be asking, what will determine the track of the storm? Well, it really all depends on I think it really all depends on this trough that's expected to come in through the north and east, because if that trough comes potentially a little earlier, then I could foresee the storm making that turn up northward a little bit eastward, because once this trough comes in, it's going to bring strong upper level winds more towards the north, and that might divert the storm from taking more of a northwest turn, which would take it directly towards Bermuda, to maybe taking that turn northward just before it gets close to Bermuda. So if this upper level trough comes earlier, then that might make Bermuda miss out on the impacts a little bit more. However, if it comes later, where the trough won't have a major effect on this storm's track, then we may see a landfall potentially in Bermuda, because we have this ridge of high pressure. The lower level flow is going to pretty much bring it straight towards Bermuda before the trough eventually turns it up northward. So it all really depends on how this when this trough comes in, when it in terms to when it comes to the track of this storm. So we definitely need to watch for the trough of this storm, the trough that's going to come in to determine the track of the storm. So definitely keep on watching Bermuda, and I would say prepare now for Bermuda. However, going ahead from Bermuda a couple days out, you see that this storm takes a sharp turn up north, where Monday 2 p.m. is just north of Bermuda, and then moves and then it speeds up rapidly. By 2 p.m. Tuesday, we see that it's already close to eastern Canada at this point, as you see the dots move further apart, representing that this storm is definitely moving faster. And it's going to be because of this cutoff low that's expected to come from the jet stream, but then essentially like cut off from the jet stream, which is why we call it a cutoff low. It's pretty much cut off from the jet stream, and really it doesn't have very strong steering flow to steer it directly towards the west like the jet stream would. So cutoff low is expected to move through the northeast and then move towards this area, and that should definitely steer this storm more towards the north, as the strong upper level winds from the upper level low will speed up this storm, along with the pressure gradient between the ridge that's expected to move, that's currently over the middle of the Atlantic, expected to speed up the storm. And you see that eventually by Tuesday, it's pretty much right at eastern Canada's doorstep. Now, a lot of people looking at the models, I'm sure, got a little scared, especially when looking at the European model, because if we take a look at the European model, only 5 days out, it's not only fairly close to eastern Canada, but it's uncomfortably close to the New England coast, as it sort of takes this a little bit of a northwestward turn before it directly moves to the northeast like most hurricanes do. And you see that the European model is taking a landfall right between the border of Maine and eastern Canada at that point, and that might be a worry for a lot of people in New England who typically don't experience hurricanes, especially a hurricane track that's moving like this. However, I'm sure a lot of people might be comparing it to Sandy, or since Sandy sort of took a weird directly northwestward turn where a trough pretty much steered Sandy towards the northwest. However, I want to state that at this point, I would say the chances of in general, I would say the chances of this directly taking a turn towards the northwest and making landfall in New England are low. And I just want to point that out because some people might be getting scared. Some people might be jumping to conclusions too quickly. However, generally speaking, it's the percentage of this really making landfall in New England is still low and unlikely at this point, since it's very rare for this to happen, and it's as a result of the westerly winds that push storms towards the northeast. And while there is that slight possibility at this point now that this could make that northwestern turn and potentially affect New England, for that to happen, pretty much everything needs to go right, and timing needs to be perfectly correct with this for this storm to actually make that northwestern turn and make landfall in New England. And the chance of that seems fairly low because this is essentially going to be a cutoff low that's going to move towards the north and east. And usually with cutoff lows, they don't have a ton of energy, or they aren't that powerful. And the reason why that's important of how powerful these cutoff lows are is because if the cutoff low is weak, then it won't have a major effect on the steering of this storm. And this cutoff low needs to be strong enough and needs to bring strong upper level winds towards the northwest to potentially steer this storm towards the north and east. And that seems unlikely because, like I said, cutoff lows for the most part are fairly weak because they don't have a lot of instability to really strengthen this and to really create convection or much wind or energy with this to potentially make this steer towards the northwest. So I wanted to point that out, and it isn't like Sandy as well because there isn't going to be a strong ridge of high pressure that's going to push it directly towards the northeast like during Sandy. So I'm going to point that out, that at this point it still seems unlikely. However, I definitely would at least keep watching in New England for this because the European for the past two runs been leaning more towards a track that's eastward that may be impacting New England a little bit more. And while the GFS is definitely having a more favorable track by mainly making this stay out to sea, you see that it still affects eastern Canada. And I noticed during events like this where during more rare occurrences, I would say, like this scenario where a storm this far up north would take a northwest turn, I noticed that the European tends to do a little bit better when it comes to rare occasions like this than the GFS. I like to use the example of Hurricane Sandy, where we saw a negatively tilted trough pretty much build through the along the east coast, and the European 7 days out was pretty much spot on where Hurricane Sandy was making landfall, and it took 4 days for the GFS to finally really say with confidence that this will impact the east coast. So I tend to notice that during events like a negatively tilted trough that's gonna dip through the northeast, that the European tends to do better. So it's more, so I would say it's a little bit better in this scenario to lean more towards the European forecast. However, we can't definitely rule out the GFS forecast. However, during events like this, I would favor the European more. And right now, the European is taking it uncomfortably close to the New England coast, and pretty much making landfall in Canada. So at this point, I would say definitely keep watching along New England. Far too early to make preparations. I won't say that, because the most likely scenario is that this will make landfall somewhere around eastern Canada, around Nova Scotia. And however, there is that slight possibility that this could come uncomfortably close to northeast, and if it does, then that could bring potentially major impacts along New England, because this storm is gonna essentially transition into extratropical, and even though even if it doesn't make landfall exactly on New England, it's gonna have a large wind field as a result of this combining with an upper level trough that's gonna bring a little bit of instability with this and expand the wind field of the storm. So when it comes to extratropical cyclones like this, you definitely don't want to pay attention too much to where it makes landfall, because they do have a large wind field typically. However, I would say with confidence that Eastern Canada should prepare for hurricane impacts, because it seems very unlikely at this point that this will just completely move out to sea and maybe skim Eastern Canada, as I could say with confidence that somewhere in Eastern Canada will experience direct impacts. And as for New England, while I still think the chance is low that you'll experience a direct landfall from this, I would at least say keep watching, because you could definitely experience impacts from this. And even if this stays off the coast, we already have some minor coastal flooding expected along some of the coasts. Because this storm is so powerful, it's going to bring a lot of waves in, even if it's hundreds of miles out. So during high tide, you may experience some minor coastal flooding in some of these areas. So definitely watch out for that. And that's about it for Hurricane Teddy. Now let's move on to Invest 90 L, which is currently straddling around the Gulf of Mexico, and you see that for the most part it's very disorganized. There's a disorganized area of showers, and we're pretty much waiting where that center of circulation will form. It could form anywhere within these thunder showers. However, I think the most likely chance of where this will exactly form is probably around this area where we're seeing the most convection and the least amount of wind shear. And this has a likely chance to develop because conditions will be favorable for this storm. If we take a look at the 200 millibar wind forecast from the GFS, it's gonna be in an area where it's gonna be very favorable for this to develop, and it's gonna be very favorable for a couple of days, which is a little bit of a worry because you don't want to see that wind shear slow this thing down. Because if we move back to right now, you see that there's a large dip in the there's a large upper level trough currently over Texas at this point that's bringing strong upper level winds through this region, and it's pretty much proven if we take a look at the satellite imagery of the storm, where you see that those thunderstorms are drifting towards the north and east as a result of an upper level low. However, if we move a couple of days out, you see that upper level low eventually gets absorbed by the jet stream, and it creates a little bit of an open area where the wind shear is fairly light for this thing to develop, and it's going to be over very warm Gulf Stream water, so that isn't a worry at all. And currently the GFS model is updating, but if we take a look at the European model at this point, the vorticity signatures, you see that the European develops this into a fairly potent storm. I wouldn't say like major hurricane status, but it seems like the European is leaning towards developing this into a hurricane. And right now, the track of this seems to be taking this up north, and it's going to move very slowly over the next several days because there's weak steering currents. There isn't a trough that's going to lift this up north very quickly, or there isn't really much of a ridge either that's going to steer this at a constant pace. So it's going to be a fairly slow moving for the most part, and that's a little bit of a worry as well because it's going to be over that warm Gulf Stream water for days on end, and it could have a lot of time to develop over that warm Gulf Stream water. So definitely keep in mind of that in the Gulf Coast, and I would definitely be watching if you're along the Gulf Coast heading into next week, because we could potentially see a hurricane and maybe even affect Louisiana after Hurricane Laura, which definitely is the least thing they need right now. So definitely keep on watching the Gulf of Mexico for that. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content. I apologize for not uploading that much over the past several weeks. I've been busy a lot. So I'll upload as much as I can. I can't give an exact schedule because a lot hits me every day. So I'll just try to upload as much as I could, and I hope you guys have a good day, and stay safe if you're along Eastern Canada, and keep watching if you're along the Gulf Coast.